Hi there, and welcome to Unfiltered Solopreneur, the podcast where we share real, unvarnished stories of people who dared to break free from the corporate grind. I'm your host, Nikhil, and I'm passionate about helping solopreneurs like you turn their dreams into reality. What happens when you leave corporate once, only to return and realize that the smaller box they've put you in doesn't fit at all? Kathy Serenko shares how burnout led her to walk away for good and how downshifting only made things worse. Today, she's turning messy workplace dynamics into measurable results. We explore her survival framework, why AI isn't the enemy of communicators, and the ageist comment that lit a fire she's still channeling. If you've ever wondered whether you can really start over on your own terms, this one's for you. Enjoy the conversation, and I'll see you on the other side. Hello and welcome to a new episode of Unfiltered Solopreneur. I'm your host, Nikhil Vaish, founder and CEO of Boost Solo. My next guest is a communication powerhouse who escaped the corporate hamster wheel to revolutionize how businesses communicate, turning ineffective workplace conversations into streamlined success stories. Kathy, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Nikhil. I appreciate the opportunity to be here.
Well, I'm excited for our conversation. And, if you've watched any of my episodes, I like to dive right in. So when we chatted before, you described corporate life as damaging emotionally, mentally, and physically. Can you take us back to the moment when you first realized the corporate world wasn't working for you? And what were the warning signs you wish you'd seen earlier?
Good question. I appreciate the opportunity to address that. It was a big turning point in my life. For a lot of years, I was a single mom, so that may not apply to a lot of your listeners, but I had to keep going. There was no option, no matter what a workforce, an employer requested of me. I was always going to go above and beyond. I was just in my nature, my work ethic, and all that I knew about working for an employer. And so I kept along year after year after year, which was to my detriment. But then the issue that I found, I like to point out three things about a workplace: volume, pace, and environment. And I feel like you can hang in there if two are bad, but once three go to the wayside, it's just so destructive. And so I was in an environment where I found the three of those things just being too hard for me to bear anymore, actually. And I was in a position where I was, for the first time in my life, able to walk away and take a breather. So had I known what I know now, I would have learned to slow down a little bit along the way.
Yeah, no, it's amazing how so many people sort of, for a variety of different reasons, right? And I've actually had other guests who are single mothers too. So I completely appreciate sort of being the breadwinner. You don't have a lot of room to sort of make the choices that a lot of other people do, right? In different circumstances. Now, the other interesting thing to me was that you also mentioned that you did leave the corporate world once, and then you returned after 2 years for another 2 years rather, and then finally made the definitive exit, right? Saying never again.
That's right.
Can you tell me what changed between those two departures, and also what gave you the confidence to make that clean break the second time around?
The first time I left was at that point when I just was so worn out. Honestly, my brain just wasn't working at the same capacity. And I had the opportunity, like I said, to step away, take a little bit of time, regain my career strength, I think. Yeah. And then I started a business and I did some strategic communication consulting, and I enjoyed that, but I was very isolated for the most part. And I'm very much a people person. I'm driven by the interactions that I have. And so I went back, but here's the thing I really think is important when we go back to the workforce. I was a little older. I didn't want to put myself under the gun of that level of career I had had before. So I thought, well, I'll step down a couple levels and this will be easy and I'll make a decent salary and I'll just lie low and it'll be easy. To the opposite. I did not fit in that box. My performance was probably the worst ever in my career. People didn't understand me because I just didn't fit in that box. And I was used to thinking big picture. That's the way my brain works. And so I got in this little box and I thought big picture, and everybody didn't really see that that's not what they were expecting from me. They were expecting execution. And I was never more unhappy in a role in my entire life. And that's stressful too. And so that was the point in my life I said, I don't care what, I'm going to go out on my own. I'm going to put together the skills I like to do, what I want to do for the rest of my career. And I knew that time I was never looking back.
Right. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And it's interesting you said that. You feel like you can go back and do it at a different pace, or like you're like, if I take a little less money, a smaller title, but I don't think the corporate world works that way anymore, right? In fact, they're replacing bigger picture, more experienced people with people they can pay less with,
Right.
smaller titles to do substantially more work now. And like you said, I think a lot of it is just execution driven. They don't want you to think anymore, or
Yes.
they just want a
That
few
was
people doing the
terrible for
thinking.
me to know
Yeah.
my ideas weren't invited or appreciated. I just became less and less of me and less and less turning out quality work. I was very stifled.
Yeah, I don't think it's a good way to grow a company or build a culture, honestly, long term, right? Because people need
Right.
to feel valued, and they need to feel like, in fact, I was talking to somebody yesterday, and she said that the one thing that's non-negotiable as for a leader, I think Brené Brown said this, is every person in the organization needs to know how their contribution contributes to the bigger mission
Yes.
of the company, right? Which
Yes.
means nobody should feel like they're doing busy work or work that's, unimportant. And I think a lot of corporations have lost sight of that today.
And it's even maybe more important because there are multiple generations in the workforce. And I haven't managed a younger workforce because I haven't been in that position for a while. But my understanding from handling the communication side and communication training is that people want the hands-on appreciation more than they ever did. Because if you go back to early in my career and maybe yours, we didn't really expect that as much. We just were all in for the position and didn't know that we could be receiving that. So this is more important than ever.
Yeah, no, I remember that ethos of ours is not to question why, right? Just to
Yeah.
do the work quietly and not look for any praise.
Yes,
But yeah,
exactly.
things have changed, and I think in a good way to some extent.
Think so
Um,
too.
yeah. So the other thing I loved was the framework you just mentioned a minute ago: volume, pace, and environment, right? And you said if two are bad, it's manageable, but if three are bad, you're just not in the right place. So I
Yeah.
guess my question is, how do you now apply this wisdom to manage your own business's rhythms?
Oh, that's a good one. It's really hard being a business owner. I feel like, and I've heard people say this, it's like any promotion within a corporation. You may be the best at what you do, but then when they put you in a people management skill, maybe you don't shine as much. And I think it's the same way from a business owner. Give me curriculum to develop, allow me to train. That's where I shine. All of the ins and outs of running a business is more difficult. And I'm thinking this over for the first time, Nikhil, to be honest with you. The the volume is a little bit much sometimes,
Yeah.
but I think as you learn, once you've been in business for a couple years, you banged your head against so many walls and you listen to so many people and it starts to sink in. Narrow your focus, know your niche, don't try to do too much. And then you can let some of the things go by the wayside. I was running in so many directions trying to decide what I should do, who I should focus on. And I think that's going to be the answer to the future of my business. And the one other thing I love about having my own business, I can sacrifice a little money to have the balance in my life if I want to. And if I want to go somewhere for 3 weeks like I am in July, I don't really owe anybody an explanation and I don't have to feel bad taking off that time.
Yeah, no, I love what you just said, Kathy, because you're right. And I think the only way to sort of figure out the rhythm as a solopreneur is by doing, right?
Yes.
And I think focus is really important. And also saying no is really important. You have to
Yes.
draw sort of clear boundaries, right? Because I mean, it's like, and the one thing people don't understand is you'll work harder than you've probably ever worked in a corporation, but everything you do is for you, right? And it's
Yeah.
authentically yours. You're not a slave to somebody else's decisions.
Right.
And like you said, if you want to do less, you can take in less and make that decision, right?
That's
That's
right.
entirely up to you again. So
I
no,
think
yeah,
Pardon me, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I think that the negative environment that you might be in a corporation can be replaced by self-doubt by early stage entrepreneurs. And so whether it's internal or external, that can be one of the biggest things to drag you down as an entrepreneur. And I think you need to surround yourself by positive voices, by other entrepreneurs that say, I've done it, you can do it. I've made all the same mistakes as you. What you're telling me is nothing new. And that you have to surround yourself by people who coach you along. And I think that's really key.
Yeah, no, wise words again. And I always tell people have truth tellers and angels, right? The people who will support you no matter what, and the people who will also be honest with you to help you improve and get better, right? Because you're right. We
Yes.
can get lost in our own head and we can get locked in our own head and we can be our own worst enemy, as we were talking
Yes.
about a minute ago. And I wanted to come and touch on that in a minute, a little more. So tell me now, in terms of like, people always have sort of an idea when they're launching solopreneurship. So what was your expectation and how is the reality compared to that?
Hmm. Very different. Because in part of when I first stepped out of corporate the first time, I did a lot of writing. I love to write. And I was writing for some publications about industrial topics, sort of taking that technology and delivering it to people who don't have that background. And so I thought, well, when I go into training, what I'll do is I'll teach people how to develop content and I'll teach them how to do marketing content. So I developed this wonderful 6-session course. I was so proud of it. It was very interactive, all face to face. And I really think it was really good, but I forgot to check how many people needed it. And so, and then AI came along, and I always say sessions 5 and 6 were just sort of blown out of the water. So at first, it took me a minute. It took me a little bit of time to take that in. And then I thought, wait a minute, it's still really good content. Just break the other ones up into separate units and then learn AI so you can now train people how to use that for what you lost. And the other thing is, I listened to a lot of HR people and a lot of employers. What were really the problems that employers are facing, and how could I develop curriculum around that? So that was like over a year process just for me to figure that out.
Yeah, again, I think great advice because again, it's like you constantly need to adapt and
Yes.
iterate. And also, and I think the question I always tell people is, are you solving a problem that needs to be solved, right? Which is a very hard thing. And that's, I think, what they call product market fit. But again, you can only do that, I think, by actually going out, testing it, showing it to people, and like you said, listening and getting
Yes.
feedback very openly, right? And then and reshaping it. So I love that you did that. And also I think, you know, it's sort of like, I think of niche and niche finding and focus is like a funnel. You start a little bit wide, right? And then you start narrowing. It's not like you change
Yes.
what you're doing or your expertise, but you start to really hone in on the specific pain point or problem that your audience has, right? And that takes
That has been
time.
my biggest step forward recently. People kept telling me, who needs your training? I'd say everybody. Who
Yeah.
doesn't need communication training? It's the backbone of every industry. Yeah, but who are you selling to? Everybody. And finally, it got through to me that everybody can't understand all your offerings. So I narrowed and narrowing. And right now, I'm really focusing on construction manufacturing, and I'm leading with some of the AI training. But that doesn't set aside all of the other things I do. But the key to that, the benefit is, now I know where to put my marketing effort. Now I know where to put my networking effort. Now I know where to, just focus all my time. And that has made all the difference for me in the last 6 months or so.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And also, it's not like other people are not going to come to you, right? The amazing thing that happens is when you become an expert in something, lots of people will come to you, and it's up to you if you want to turn them away or not. Then, right?
That's
Versus
right.
the other way around, when you're throwing the kitchen sink,
Yes,
nobody's really clear on who you're helping, right?
that's
Like I
right.
always say, if your faucet's leaking, you're not going to call a jack of all house fix it. You're going to call a plumber, right?
Ah, that
But
is a good way. I wish
yeah.
someone had said it to me that simply before.
Well, we,
There's one thing that a lot of, I know the entrepreneurs say, fail fast.
yeah.
And I did not get that. And if I could say something to my first days as an entrepreneur, is fail fast. Like, don't try to figure everything out and then realize it doesn't work. If I had failed a lot sooner, I would have been further along, but that's okay because that's how we learn.
Yeah, I think so too. I think, we have to learn through experience. We don't really imbibe or digest the same way if we hear it from someone or we read it in a book, right? I don't feel like that happens, especially on
No,
this journey. So I agree
very
with you.
true.
Now, you also told me something recently, that somebody recently implied that your age might be a limitation, which actually lit a fire under you. So
It
how has that experience shaped your approach to positioning yourself and your expertise in the market?
it did light a fire under me. And I don't know if it was directed specifically at me. In one conversation, it was just a very from a younger to an older person. I don't think they thought they were conveying that at all.
Right.
But I was picking it up. And then another time on a networking call with the group, I picked it up again. And I thought, nobody is going to keep me down. I know what I can do. I know what I'm good at. And for a while I had been like, oh, I just don't know how to get my business off the ground. So that was a great impetus for me to just stand up and find my strength and say, wait a minute, I'm as good as anybody else out there, and I'm going to deliver good stuff and go for it. So it
Yeah.
was good for me. Hurtful, but good for me.
Yeah, and I love that because there are two ways you can deal with that, right? You can let it defeat you, or you can use it as fuel to really sort of ignite and get you going, right? And I agree
Right.
with you. Somebody once told me a long time ago too that, oh, the solopreneur market is impossible. You're never going to crack that market. It's like it's too small, and blah 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 blah. And I was like, yeah,
I don't
that
think so.
made me even more sort of like wanting to find a solution that would work, right? And so here
Yes,
we are on the journey.
we can't be where we are until we've had all the years of experience. I was at a woman's entrepreneur group, and it was all people in my age range, a little younger, a little older, starting businesses. And everyone was telling their great experiences, and they would all say at the end, "Oh, I wish I had done it sooner." And then one person quite wisely said, "You couldn't have done it sooner. You didn't have the experience." And that's what a lot of us have to offer. It's all the hard knocks that brought us to where we are that allows us to have something to pass on to the next person.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I feel the same way. Like I wanted to start this company a long time ago, but I knew I wasn't ready until
Mhm.
last year when I actually did, right? And it's not sitting around and waiting for the right time. Like you said, it's an accumulation of the wisdom, the experience, and sort of being in the right place to be able to, follow
Yeah,
through on it. So I
that's
agree
right.
with you. Yeah.
And I'm proud of myself. Very
Yeah.
proud that I took that step and that I've decided to start a business and be successful at that. I think that's an attitude we have to have.
Yeah, and you're right. And I think the other thing you said is also finding a tribe, right? Like you did with the Women's
Yes.
Entrepreneur Group. It's
Yes.
really important, like you said, on your own, it becomes much harder if you're locked in a room by yourself with your own mind. None of us, I think, are meant to be that way, right? In terms
No,
of we need sort of the support system, if you like, and especially on this journey, I think, because it's perhaps the loneliest one there is. Um,
I don't
being a
hesitate
solopreneur.
to reach out. I
Yeah.
cannot tell you how much networking I've done. And I have never found a person that said to me, Kathy, I don't have time for you. Kathy, I don't want to share the knowledge I have. I have had some people just invest their knowledge and their passion in me and then introduce me to four other people. That I just had that happen this week. I had a great conversation and he said, "Oh, you want to work in construction? Bring the AI training to construction. I've got four people to connect you to." And I think solopreneurs, entrepreneurs invest in one another.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I call it sort of like co-opetition, right? Because I've had the same thing where it's like people who are doing same or very similar things have introduced me to people who they didn't feel was the right fit for them, or vice versa. So I agree with you. I think we all tend to sort of help each other because I
That's it.
guess we sort of worn the same shoes, right? So we
And we're not
know.
scratching to get to a single position at the top.
No, and we're not looking to become unicorns, and we're not looking
No,
to become monopolistic, sort of global, hyper growth companies. I don't
no,
think it's very different from the traditional, entrepreneur, at least
that's right.
the stereotype of the one that exists. As a communication strategist who's helped others communicate more effectively, tell me what's been the most challenging aspect of communicating your unique value in this marketplace.
I think it goes back a little bit to narrowing the scope and
Yeah.
I was trying to get people to understand the mix between communication and efficiency, because I think the more I've researched, the more I've done training, I see it as an absolute connection. But if I say efficiency, people think operations, which is completely understandable. So it's my desire to get across to them, look, the more effective you are in your communication, the more waste you avoid. And I like to use email as an example because everyone can relate to it. How many times do we get emails that are irrelevant to us, rambling? We don't know what it's about. People don't open ours. There's 4 times back and forth. How much time is wasted? In fact, I just did a blog the other day. And if I can remember the stats from it, on average, we spend 2.25 hours a day on email. For $50 an hour, that's $113 a day. It's $28,000 of your time as an employee on email.
Wow.
And they say 60% of that is waste. All of the looking for information and all. If we could only slash just a little bit of that, the efficiency that a company will pick up is huge. And so back to your original question, what's been hard for me to market myself is to get that passion in my head into logical terms to help a prospect or a client get what I'm saying.
Right. So in terms of articulating in a way that's tangible, right? Because that I think is the hardest piece. Because
Yes.
people understand like you can be more efficient, you can save time, but those things don't really translate into the aha for
That's right.
to happen, right? But
That's
the way
right.
you said it, I love. You've turned it into value
Good.
and bottom line dollars, right? Which any company would wake up and look at, especially a small business. You're losing that kind of money every month in
Yeah.
productivity. Yeah.
Or an employee who has, a company that has 50 employees. Their amount saved can be $150,000 a year or more when we talk about just addressing a small percentage of that waste.
Yeah, no, I agree. And also I think there's a drain on productivity, right? And
Yes.
morale. So you've got, I don't
Morale.
know if you can quantify that, but yeah, because if you're, going back to your rhythms of work, there's nothing more soul sucking than spending hours deciphering
Yes.
email or trying to, 14 emails to have what one conversation would have cleared up in about 3 minutes.
Right. It's frustrating. And then on the larger communication aspect, people that are in companies that don't feel like the executives on down or their managers communicate well get very disconnected. Their morale goes down. And I don't have statistics, but there are studies that it definitely impacts retention. It goes back to what we said. We need to know our place in the organization. We need to know our value. And if somebody from the top down at some level doesn't make that clear to us through communication, then we do lose heart and it does trickle down.
Yeah, true. And you can see it. You could absolutely directly impacts the bottom line, like you said.
Mm-hmm.
So you identified communication as the low hanging fruit for companies, right?
Mm-hmm.
That want to be more efficient. So how did you sort of land on that angle, and how is your approach evolved now? And you can tell me a little bit about. You mentioned incorporating AI, so could you talk a little bit about that too?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The reason I came to the communication training is when I said I left my job corporate for the last time, I had this little talk with myself. I said, what are you passionate about? What are you best at? And my career history includes facilitation, corporate facilitation, communication, PR, and then the writing aspect. And those are the things that stand out to me, and curriculum design. Those are the things I really love to do. And I said, okay, I'm going to form my business around that. So I started looking at the communication components.
Mhm.
And then when AI, I think November 2023, I might be actually ahead a year, 2022 into the spring of 2023, nobody was really training on it at first. People were it was all the rage, but I didn't see much training it for the average person. And I thought, well, that's a communication tool. Especially initially, it was very much chat GPT on content development. And so that was the easiest way for me to train it. Hey, marketing content, emails, reports. And so that's where my focus was at first, on communication tools to be more productive.
Right. And so, I mean, some people could say sort of AI is competing with you, right? In a way, how have you sort of what have you found in terms of companies' receptiveness to that? Because most companies have mandated employees use AI. There, I know from the data I've been reading, there's a lot of resistance. But to your point, you have to know how to use AI, because I always say garbage in, garbage out.
Absolutely. When I first started teaching it, it was very important just to show people how to create a persona and tone. And because at that point, when you put a prompt in, you could put it into ChatGPT and Claude or whatever was popular at the time, and it would come out very formulaic and it would look identical in both language models. That's evolved. It's
Yeah.
not quite like that, but a lot of people are still on the I don't want to touch it because it's AI. It's just very um, formulaic and fluffy. That's because that's up to us how to use it. Now it's evolved so much that I don't think that's the risk as much if people know how to prompt, but it is about accuracy and the knowledge that it's a tool to extend and augment your expertise. And a lot, as long as people perceive it as an end result and a solution, they're either going to use it improperly or they're going to send out things that are going to hurt their credibility. And so that to me is how to use it properly and being a problem solver about how you use it. So if in my training I guide you through and you learn to use it for content development, and then some research, but you only apply it for what we did in that class, then you're
Right.
not really absorbing. You're not a problem solver. You should walk away with the processes. So when new tasks come up, you can say, how do I now take this tool AI and use it to get the same productivity and efficiency with quality and with accuracy?
Yeah, and I love that you said it's a tool, right? That's what people
Mhm.
need to remember. It's just a tool. It's like,
That's right.
some people spend a lot of time in Photoshop, or you and I could go in Photoshop and come out with two very different outcomes in terms of, using the same tool and the same platform.
Right.
So I think there is sort of building that muscle, if you like, in terms of, prompting and even having conversations with AI till you get to the output that you're looking for, which is more custom than sort of the generic one.
Right. And now you can begin to train. So it has your voice, your tone, your style. But I am a writer. A lot of people say, is it a competition? I would say no. I don't do writing solely anymore. But even with, I like to use Perplexity, which is a great search engine and turns out some very referenced, reliable material. But I never use anything as it is if I'm writing from a content perspective. I'm always going to find a way to use it to my advantage, but make sure it's my information. One thing I like to do though is do my writing and put it in and say, hey, any suggestions? So that's a really good point. But we're the experts first.
Yeah, I agree. And in fact, one of my favorite things that I tell people is tell AI what to do, never ask AI what to do, right? And
Good
that's
point.
going back to exactly what you said, which is I do
Yes.
the same thing. Like I originate the writing, the thinking, and then I will go and say, okay, now show me where I can make it pithier or, stronger or like more
Yes.
engaging, but
Yes.
never the other way around. I don't, and I think that's the mistake a lot of people make is they, like you said, they think of it as the outcome. Like you go in and say, give me ta-da, and you think that's going to be like the thing you take and go away with.
And I think it's gone so far beyond content development now.
Yeah.
Even the language models now, the logic, the research, the planning, the decision support. In fact, when I teach now, I want to either start people on the content if they have no experience, but if they're using it for content, I want to open their eyes to those higher level applications because the brainstorming and the logic that goes on and the hours you can save. Now, I did my growth strategy not that long ago. I rebuilt it, and the amount of market and competitive analysis I was able to do and the metrics for my growth and all that I could pull out in no time at all was a huge, huge help. But it doesn't help to have the document sitting there if I don't understand it, if I can't apply it. But I think people need to move beyond the content development at this point in time.
Yeah, no, I agree. And so I'm just curious, have you found any sort of resistance to AI with the employees that you work with? And are there any generational differences you've seen just anecdotally?
I can't say that I have in class seen the age differential, but that's probably a big yes, because most of the people in my classes are probably 40-ish up, let's say. So they are people who are coming to the table, if they're coming as individuals, with a lot of hesitance. In fact, I'm doing a continuing education class this week, and I ask for a survey first. And out of those that have completed the survey, 60% have not even tried it yet.
Wow.
40% have, but they use it for personal use or very light business, which tells me they're sort of using it for like a glorified Google. Tell me something, and we're amazed by the output, but they're really not applying it for work scenarios. The beautiful thing, though, is anybody can learn it if they're given the right processes.
Yeah.
I do think there's still hesitation at an individual level. I think there's hesitation at a business level, sometimes for good reasons, sometimes not. A lot of employers just haven't looked into it yet. That's a negative reason. A lot of them are concerned about cybersecurity and proprietary information. Those are really valid reasons. So when I train, I don't pretend to be the end all. I give them the processes, but I want the employer to know they also have to look into policy and security. But a lot of companies, there are a few people using it within the company, but the employers don't know how they're using it or
Right.
whether they're giving away important information. So the employers really have to take it, from the top, and they have to get a hold of it and make it work for their organization.
Yeah, and I guess the other thing they're struggling with is actually seeing sort of the ROI, right, of AI usage by employees. But then I said that sort of goes back to the chicken and the egg thing, which is like, unless you train them and show them
Yeah.
how to get productivity out of it, you're not going to see the productivity levels or the increase in, efficiency and all the other things it's been touting.
The
That's
the the efficiency and productivity should, if they're trained, in my opinion and my experience, should be immediately visible. And
right.
I'll share a story with you. I was doing some training for a union, and these were tradespeople who had moved up into council rep positions. And they didn't have a lot of experience, so they were a little hesitant. But when I train, I do applications. So they're applying the processes hands-on as we go. So at the end, the president came up. I had 150 people across their 7 states there. The president came up to me at the end with his phone, and he said, "Well, it's working because I just got an email with all the research backing of why this person needs more staff." And so right away he saw the productivity. And that's how fast it should be. They should leave the class with skills to be more productive. So if they trust the training process and they open their minds to it, I can't imagine a company that won't see immediate increases in productivity.
Yeah, no, I love that story you just shared. And also, I think that's the beauty of it, right? If you use it the right way, we can actually free up a lot of the mundane tasks and work that we do, become
Yes.
more efficient, and I think leave our brains and our mind space open for bigger things, right? But again, you have to be taught how to do that, just like anything else.
And
Um,
kept updated. Things
yes,
are changing at such a rapid pace. Last year, I wouldn't have used it to teach people to look into decision support.
right.
Would have never thought of that. I would have never seen the application. So as things evolve, we really need to stay up on it.
Yeah, so that's an interesting thing. So it is changing really rapidly. So how do you keep pace with the rate of change, and how are you sort of are you just teaching yourself, or what are the things you do?
Stay a step ahead.
Yeah.
Well, I formed a lot of collaborative relationships with people who are more on the, what I'll say, the tech side of AI. They work with companies on the infrastructure and the cybersecurity and making sure the company's safe. And then I so I do a lot of interaction. I do a lot of reading. I do a lot of question and answer and application myself. So before I say how it works, I want to know that I can take a scenario. One thing I just started, I do a 15-minute demonstration. So if I have a business leader who says, well, I don't know if I want to talk to her about this or not. Hey, let me do a 15-minute demonstration. And I don't ask them what their scenarios are. I talk to them, what's a problem you're having? Okay, you spend 4 hours on that task. Let's see how long it takes us. Put it in. Oh, we just turned that task from 40 minutes, 44 hours, pardon me, 4 hours into 10 minutes. How's that work for you?
Yeah.
What if we could do this across your employee base so they see the productivity? And the key is not telling them theoretically what it can be used for. It's saying your business, you're in manufacturing, you're having trouble with this. Let's see. The worst thing we can do is find out that we have to change our approach a little bit. But it's there. Whatever we want to accomplish, the base information is there.
Yeah, again, powerful. Demonstrations are powerful, right? Theory is hard for people to sort of grasp and understand, or see the outcomes from. But I think
And who
I
wants to listen to that? Yeah, yeah.
yeah, I know,
Who
true.
wants a talking head telling us about AI? We want to see it. We want to know if it works.
And that's true in college today too. People don't want to listen to that stuff anymore because it's like unless you can apply it, what's the value, right?
If
Yeah.
you don't mind, I want to share something a little bit off to the side maybe, but you said about in college. I
Yeah.
was speaking with an engineer at a networking event, and he said, I'm really afraid to use this in our company because we build bridges. Like if people rely on AI and they don't know what they're doing, we're going to have bridges fall down. And I said, that is absolutely true. That takes us to another point of communication where generations have to work across generations to communicate. So we have a lot of boomers getting ready to leave the workforce, and we have the digital natives coming in.
Yeah.
But there has to be bringing that knowledge together. And that's where I think using AI to develop an internal knowledge base so that the new people coming in, they may be more aware of AI, but they also need to know what the compliance and the internal expectations are, everything that keeps the company's credibility up. So that communication across generations and using AI as the tool in the reservoir for knowledge is crucial to companies at this point in time.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think you made a really important point, which is that you rely on AI 100%, right?
No,
That's
no,
not what anyone's advocating. It's not
no.
as a replacement to our brains, our knowledge, our experience, and what we bring, our lived experience too. But you're right. It's a good training repository as long as you don't forego the human element, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, and it's not even like, that I think is a genuine fear though, is like people feel like you shut off brain and just use AI for everything, right? I read today that the UAE government now has decided they're going to use AI to write new laws. And somebody was really concerned, saying that that's probably not a great idea because there's still a lot of hallucination,
Yes.
and not everything that it even gives you from, the repository that it pulls from is accurate. So,
No, absolutely. It's this big data universe that everybody's playing in.
yeah.
There are bound to be errors and biases. It's great for planning. It could be come up with some draft things, give us some ideas, but to use it to, turn out an end product would probably be a huge disaster,
Yeah,
actually.
yeah, exactly. It should supplement our thinking, not replace it, right? That's
Yes.
what I think people need to sort of make the distinction. So,
Yes.
changing tracks a little bit now. One of the other things you mentioned to me was that you sort of had a moment of self-talk recently, right? Where you said to yourself, "You have what it takes. Quit doubting yourself." So, could you
Yes.
tell us what triggered that conversation with yourself, and how is that mindset, shift sort of changed in how you show up in your business now?
I have that personality anyway, and I
Yeah.
don't think I'm alone. I don't know if it's more women or it's just human nature to doubt ourselves, to be able to sell ourselves. And then we talked about as an entrepreneur how lonely it can be in your planning. But when I decided that I was going to make the investment in me and my success and just make a clear cut line in the sand that I am going to do this. I'm going to get a business coach for a couple sessions to help me understand lead generation, to know how to close sales. I'm going to look at the pinpointed skills I'm lacking, and I'm going to fill the gaps, and I'm going to trust my expertise. And then I see other people succeeding around me. I'm like, wait a minute, I'm just as capable. Why am I not reaching their level of success? And I had a feeling that it was a lot of my own personality and self-doubt spilling over. And I've made that shift. And like I said, I'm investing in myself to get exactly where I need to be. And combining that with my knowledge of how to narrow what I'm going to do, that's been real help to me.
Well, I appreciate you sharing that, and I can tell you it's not just women. It's just that men will never admit it.
There
That's
you
the difference.
go. That's probably true.
Therein lies the difference. Yes. Oh, and I go through it all the time too. It's like I feel like every time you do something new, you're going to face self-doubt, right? It's
Right.
just part of human nature.
Do you think
Uh,
it's true to fake it? Because when I give my reviews back, I'm very sensitive about that. Like I want all fives. What? Somebody gave me a 4? What did I do wrong? What did I do wrong? But those reviews and those testimonials feed into what we should know. We can't rely on them because it could, tip the cart mentally for us too quickly. But when we get that feedback and people respect us as professionals and talk to us about the value and say, this is how I've changed work, we have to take that in and we have to absorb that and let that speak to us to balance the doubts that we have ourselves.
yeah, no, I agree. And also use the feedback to improve and get
Yes.
better at what we're doing, right? Because that's really
Yes.
what it's about. It's no fun if you just become an expert and you never need to learn anything anymore. I think that would be a very boring sort of existence.
I think it
Um,
would be closed-minded too and blind because I don't think
right.
you'll ever achieve that.
I agree, unless there are people who think that way. But then
Yes, probably.
that's maybe a whole different podcast. So let me ask you, as a communication trainer who helps others become more effective, where do you find yourself struggling to take your own advice? If there are there any areas where you're like, I've taught people that, but I need to
Yeah,
sort of practice what I preach. Yeah,
absolutely. Listening for pain points instead of going off with solutions. When
yeah,
you're really excited about what you teach and you really believe it, you can start out saying how great the product or how great the service is without really listening to see whether they're even interested or they care. That's one thing. And then I've done a lot of email training, and it's so easy to train people how to do it right. But I find some of the things I teach in my own rambling, I've had to learn to say, wait a minute, what do people need from you? So I think there are a lot of times when there's the crossover there. And the more I do training, the more I hear that and adjust what I do.
yeah, and I completely agree. In fact, I'm smiling because earlier this week last week I put myself through a roast with some really smart professionals to pick apart my website messaging and everything, and it was amazing. And I do this for a living, and they
Yeah.
found things that I have told clients never to do that I had done, and
Yes.
there were things that I always tell clients to do that I had not done. Right?
Yes.
So it's like our own blind spots. Sometimes heuristics can work against you, right? So because
It's sort of a joke, and hopefully I won't offend anyone listening, but like the hairstylist that you don't appreciate the way they keep their hair, or someone who is the expert but doesn't always apply it to themselves. I think it is common.
yeah, and I think it's also human nature, right? It's very hard to see in ourselves some of the things we can see in others. But again,
Yes.
going back to your thing about tribes and having people around you who can sort of help, point some of those things out, I think is really important.
I think those are true mentors and true friends. The people that will give you the truth. How are you going to get better? I actually really appreciate those people in my life.
Same here. I call them truth tellers, and I hold them close. And it's, as like you said, it's not always pleasant or painful. And of course,
No.
like sitting there the other day, I was like, ugh, ugh, but I was like, I needed to hear that. So, and it's helped
Might
me.
have to have one of those roast sessions.
Once you get over your ego, then you're okay. You're like, okay, yeah,
Yes.
that was actually very helpful, and now I can
Yes.
move forward. So let me ask you, Kathy, if we were to meet again 5 years from now, where would you want to be? What would you want to have achieved?
I would be looking back, Nikhil, telling you how far along I am in my journey, how I met and exceeded my revenue goals because I believed in myself and I had found my spot and less stressed. And when I say in maintenance mode, I don't mean from the need to still find leads and sell, but in maintenance mode from the perspective that I found my spot, my sweet spot in what I train and what I offer and my confidence in myself. And I will probably not be available a couple months a year because I might be traveling abroad.
Love it. Yeah. So, if you could offer one piece of advice to somebody who wants to start their solopreneur journey, what would you tell them?
Be courageous and be willing to fail and just jump in because you're going to get a lot of naysayers.
Yeah, including your own mind, right?
Probably most.
Yeah. No,
But
that's
make
great.
sure you have a valid starting point. I think I would backtrack and say most important is to do your research first and make sure you're in the right spot at the right time. Otherwise, not only will you doubt yourself, but you really are setting yourself up for a lot of disappointment and maybe lack of success.
Right. Don't try and swim upstream the first time around, right?
Right.
Until
Like
you
we
become a really good swimmer. Yeah.
did.
I love that. So, is there anything else you'd like to share, Kathy, that we haven't covered?
I think we've had a good conversation and covered everything that I felt is important. How about you? Anything
Yeah.
I
No, I don't think so. I think you shared a lot of practical and wisdom that people will appreciate listening to and hearing. So I think we've had a
Wonderful.
great conversation. So that brings us to a rapid fire round. So I'm just going to
Oh,
throw 5 questions at you, whatever comes to mind. So if
okay.
your
This could be
communi-
dangerous.
it'll be fun. If your communication training approach was a recipe, what would be the secret ingredient?
Engagement,
Ooh, I love it.
fun engagement.
Complete this sentence. Most businesses completely overlook blank when it comes to communication.
The benefit, the,
The
the,
benefit.
the true value.
Yeah. What's your favorite facilitation trick or icebreaker?
I love calling people by name and I love moving around the room. And even if I'm training virtual, I want to engage one at a time. I want them to see me.
Okay. What's your go to reset ritual when you hit a wall?
I feel like you just have to, if you're training in front of people, you just have to accept that something didn't go exactly like you wanted and move on.
Okay. What's the most unexpectedly useful skill from your PR days that you found, valuable today as a solopreneur?
Question asking, really looking into what people want to hear, what will
Okay.
move people.
What's the best investment under $100 that you made in your business this year?
It's 140. Can I do that?
Sure. Why not?
There's an app called Udly, and
Okay.
you can practice your sales pitches. You can practice your presentations. I am in love with it.
Oh, wow. I like that. Great tip and great way to end the show. So, Kathy, it's been so much fun having you on the show. Thank you so much for your openness, for your honesty, and for all the wisdom that you brought to our listeners.
Thank you. I've enjoyed it. Appreciate the conversation.
Kathy's story is more than a pivot, it's a reckoning. A slow unraveling of the story she told herself to survive in corporate spaces and a bold rebuilding on her own terms. Here are my key takeaways. The 3-factor framework is your early warning system. Kathy's volume, pace, and environment framework stands out because it's simple and measurable. If one's off, you can manage. If all 3 go sideways, you're headed for burnout. Solopreneurs, watch these levers closely. If your work, your rhythm, and your setting are all draining you, it's time to reset quickly. Less responsibility doesn't mean less misery. Kathy thought stepping down would ease the pressure. Instead, she lost visibility. Her strategic thinking had no room in an execution-only role. Solopreneurs, if you keep shrinking to fit, you'll disappear. Build a space that reflects your full value. Narrow your focus to amplify your impact. Kathy tried to serve everyone until she chose construction and manufacturing. Suddenly, her messaging sharpened and her offers clicked. Remember, if you try to serve everyone, you serve no one. Clarity creates momentum. Find your edge, then go narrow. Turn bias into your differentiator. When someone implied she might be too old to pivot, Kathy didn't retreat. She got fired up and still uses it as fuel. Whatever bias you face, age, race, background, experience, use it as proof of value, not a reason to shrink. AI amplifies expertise, it doesn't replace it. While many panicked about AI, Kathy leaned in. Instead of resisting the shift, she became a guide, helping others use it well. Don't resist the tools that are changing your industry. Your edge comes from learning them deeply and showing others how to navigate the change. Fail fast really means learn fast. Kathy was used to getting things right the first time, so failing fast didn't come naturally. But once she embraced experimentation, she found her rhythm. Progress doesn't come from perfect plans, it comes from testing, listening, and adjusting again and again and again. Kathy's journey is a reminder that true freedom isn't found in titles or timelines. It's found in listening to your gut, trusting your path, and continuously learning and building a business that actually serves your life. Thanks for listening to Unfiltered Solopreneur. If you got value from today's episode, subscribe, leave a review, and share it with another solopreneur who needs this message. Until next time, keep breaking free from the corporate grind, and remember, your story is your most powerful asset. Live solo or die corporate.